Okay.
I'm gonna try.
Well, these aren't too hard. They're not as hard as last week.
What's the theme? Oh, thank you.
Well, there's no theme. The theme is board games. So you're gonna
What's the game?
you're gonna guess the games. That's the game. You're gonna guess the game. So to guess the game, you're gonna ring in on your buzzer.
Like this?
That's you. You're blue. Yep. Go ahead. And you're pink, and that's a honking horn, so that works too. Okay, great. So let's do it. Are you ready for question 1?
Yes.
Here's question 1.
Come on.
There it is. This is a sugary quest around Gumdrop Mountains.
Candyland.
Oh man, I didn't even get to read the words. I'm pretty sure the answer is Candyland. A little quicker next time. Okay.
I thought you had to wait till you. I can already tell because I was like Candyland.
All right, so maybe we should wait till I finish reading. Let's do that for the next one. That'll make it more fair, okay?
Candyland.
Next time I'm gonna make the picture really small so you can't see it. This is whoa, what happened there? There we go. This classic version of this game leaves me a little scrambled, but those with a dictionary for a brain have a blast with this board game.
Scramble.
Say it again.
Scramble.
Not scramble. You wanna try? Okay, what do you think it is?
Okay.
No idea? It's Scrabble. You were really close. Scrabble.
I mispronounce a lot of stuff.
That's okay. You were really close. Really close.
Scramble.
That says Scrabble. There's no M in there. All right, let's go with question number 3. This life-size board game. I gotta read the words. This life-size board game will get you tied up in knots.
Twister.
Church, who won? They both got it? Woo! Read faster. Okay. Let's try for number 4. We're gonna just put them right there in the middle.
Okay.
I'm gonna scramble them up for you.
Oh, we can see which color.
Oh, okay. This game, named after a rodent, has players earn pieces of cheese and set up contraptions for their opponents to get caught.
Mousetrap.
It is Mousetrap. That was quick. Did you know that one? Don't know that game? Okay. Final question. YouTube? Oh my goodness.
Oh, I know this one.
Do you know this one? All right, ring in.
Guess who?
It is Guess Who. So in this game, you describe different features of faces to find out who your opponent might be. So I believe it was 3-2. So Dalton, I believe you're the winner. And the winner today is getting, what game is this?
Chess.
Shoots and Ladders. All right, guys, thanks for playing. I'm glad that you came up. Well done. Well done. Well, that was fun. Everybody did great. I appreciate you guys playing today. And of course, yes, we are in our series called Board Games. And Matt will be back up here next week to share with you a brand new game. So we're going to get in. So yeah, our game today is Shoots and Ladders. And there we go. It took me a little bit to figure out where I wanted to go with this one. I felt like last week was a little bit bumpy for me. I didn't really know if that was like really hitting it, but Shoots and Ladders, I figured we brought the kids back up here for a couple weeks and we wanted to do something a little simpler before we get too crazy, because there's some crazy board games out there. And Shoots and Ladders is simple, but it made me think about life's ups and downs, right? I mean, it's pretty simple to think about. We've got our ladders and we've got our slides or our chutes. We're going to leave this up there. Just leave that up there for a little bit. So the game is actually pretty simple. You start at number 1, and you work your way up across the board until you get to 100. Sometimes there's dice. In this 2017 version, there's a spinner, and you move by the number that you get on your spin, and sometimes you land on ladders, and sometimes you land on chutes. But before we get into that too much, I am going to leave that up here on the screen, so that might be a distraction for you, but I want to talk about this picture in just a few minutes. See, in life, Sometimes we put ourselves on pedestals, or maybe rungs, if you will. We often like to compare ourselves with others, and we do that at work, and we might try to be getting on a better pay grade, or maybe if we think back to when we were school age, and we had all kinds of competition. We had peer pressure, right? Things that allow us to have challenges. I know one of the things for me was I really wanted to be on student council. I don't know, it was just something I wanted to do. I wanted to be on student council, and you had to get a letter written every year that you wanted to join, and I wrote letters year after year after year. And you know what? Never got on student council. Not once. Not when I was in elementary school, not when I was in middle school, not even when I was in high school. I never made it to student council, and I just felt that that was one step that I needed in my educational career. But that's okay. We have ups and we have downs, and my letter didn't get me in, and I would never had to get any votes for anything, but there was still, for me, that was a down. That was sad. It was something that I wanted to be a part of, to kind of win at. And then there's other things. There's things like perfect attendance. Sometimes we really strive to have perfect attendance and never miss a day of school. Or maybe for you, maybe that's honor roll. Maybe honor roll was something that you strive for. You wanted to have really good grades. But the reality is, we're all different, and we all succeed in different ways. And sometimes we try to force our success to happen, and other times we just hit snags and we end up on a chute or a slide that's kind of sends us backwards. And maybe not in a physical sense, but maybe mentally. Maybe we get sad about something. Maybe it's just a distraction that wasn't meant to happen, and it's not how we looked at it that really mattered. So all of these ideas that I'm trying to bring to the table here with Chutes and Ladders is that we have ups and we have downs. We have good times and we have bad times. The game Chutes and Ladders actually originated in ancient India, okay? And it was originally called Snakes and Ladders. And it was very ornate. There was lots of pictures and stuff. And you can kind of see in 2017, this version here, it was still very similar. The Snakes and Ladders was just a traditional way for the culture to share a similar game. And the game idea was very simple. It was meant to teach some life lessons, life's ups and life's downs. And when they brought the game to England, they started to kind of make it a more modern version. And eventually, we changed the name to Chutes and Ladders. And this is a game that we have here in the United States, made by Milton Bradley. And the unique thing about this game, and this was true for the ancient India version, for the England versions, for the American versions, there's depictions of good deeds and bad deeds. And sometimes they're a little childish. Obviously, it's a kid's game. It's meant to teach morality. It's meant to teach a little bit about the good and the bad that we can sometimes do. Here, it looks like we have little Susie or whomever grooming her cat, and now her cat is giving her kisses and loving on her a little bit there. And then we come up here, and maybe little Johnny, he's riding his bike with no hands, his feet aren't on the pedals, and here's Johnny with a sling on his arm for not being careful, not wearing a helmet, and not probably doing what his mom or dad told him to do with keeping his feet on the pedals and all of that. So, and then we have another one here. Here she's carrying all of the dishes. She's probably listening to her parents, probably clearing the table after dinner, but she decided to do it all at once. She figured, I'm going to save a lot of time. I'm going to do this all at once, and she slipped and fell, and now all the dishes are broken, and she's really sad and upset. So that's the picture. That is what's happening in Chutes and Ladders. It is a game to kind of teach a little bit about life, a little bit about life's lessons and some of the morality that is surrounding doing good deeds and not following directions. So I found this quote, and I kind of thought it was interesting. It's from a book by the author Salman Rushdie. And here's what he says about this game. All games have morals, And the game of snakes and ladders captures, as no other activity can hope to do, the eternal truth that every ladder you hope to climb, a snake is waiting just around the corner. And for every snake, a ladder will compensate, but it's more than that. There's no mere carrot and stick affair, because implicit in the game is unchanging two-ness of things. The duality of up against down, good against evil. The solid rationality of ladders balances the occult sinuosities of the serpent and the opposite of the staircase and cobra, which we can see. Metaphorically, and I know there's a lot of big words in here, but metaphorically, everything is about all opposites, alpha against omega, or father against mother. It's an idea of opposites, good versus evil. So that's something that we need to think about as we dig in today. So as we're applying these life lessons through board games, there was one specific story that just sort of stuck in my head, and that is actually the story of Job. Job has a very kind of misunderstood life. So everybody kind of put your seatbelts on, because we're going to go through the book of Job. We're going to talk about some ups and downs of Job's life so that we can understand how life is a challenge, and we have to be able and ready to combat those challenges. So the story of Job creates lots of questions. There are questions about morality and questions about the problem of evil that exists. And we all know that evil exists in our world. We've all experienced that in some way or another. And we all have questions about why we have bad things happening to good people, right? We've all kind of thought that at some point. And I need to steal from another author and pastor. I would love to be able to meet this guy someday. He just has a lot of great wisdom in today's church. His name is John Mark Comer, and he says this: how do you square a God who created the universe out of love with the reality of what you read day after day on your morning news app? With an infant child born with a physical deformity or a mental handicap, with child abuse, with the refugee crisis, maybe with war, with cancer, with chronic illness, with a follower of Jesus that is dealing for a decade or longer with mental illness, or with death itself. How in the world does all of this fit together? I think they're great questions. And I think it's important that we look at each of those as we kind of maybe look around the room or look internally at ourselves with what we're dealing with. There are questions that we often pose to ourselves that make us challenge that aspect of evil. We're all affected by this in one way or another. And how we deal with it might affect others as well. There are questions probably going in your mind from something going on at home, something going on at work, maybe something that's going on with a friendship. But the reality is, every single one of us, and even those that are watching online, we could misrepresent the church by how we act in these circumstances. And if we're not careful, we might act in a way that somebody may never step foot in a church or this church ever again, because we're not presenting those challenges in a way that reflect God well. And I think Job is a great example of this. So we're going to jump right in. At the beginning, we're going to see God having a conversation with a group of people. And we're going to start right here in Job 1:1. And it says, "In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and that is important. We'll find out later on. He had owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys, and he had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people in the East. So remember, I started off like sometimes we want that next pay grade. We want to step up that next bump at work, or we want to have that next achievement at school. Job is pretty successful. He has a lot going on for him. He's got a big family and everything in the world that he could desire. But here's the main thing. He feared God, he shunned evil, and he was known to be blameless and upright. Those are what we need to focus on. But let's see what Job does with all of this. So we learn all this. Job lands on basically square one at the board game here, and he's already jumped on a ladder and almost went right to the top. He's got all these servants, all of this game and all of the sheep and everything to support his family and his lifestyle. But then we see this conversation with God beginning in verse 6. One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them. The Lord said to Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan answered the Lord, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." So everybody think about this for a moment. We've all kind of seen shows like Law and Order, or maybe a movie where there's a judge and there's a jury, and that's kind of what's going on here. God is holding court, and in court you have Satan, who is an accuser and works like on the bad side of things, trying to protect the bad, and you have these angels of God trying to protect the good. And so that's where this conversation is going. So it kind of gives a little scenery, if you will, of what's happening. And God asks Satan a question, and Satan basically responds, "Hey, this is none of your business. I do what I want." Satan's acting like he's not under God's authority. And this is where we really have to experience and challenge the concept of evil. Satan, we know, is evil, and he is continuing to act as such. So then we see in verse 8, "Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him.'" He's blameless, right? He's upright. A man who fears God, who shuns evil. And Satan replies, "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." So Satan's convinced that when bad things happen to good people, that they will eventually shun God. And we're going to walk through that now. We're going to see how Job responds to the next challenges that he faces, and they happen immediately, right here, verse 12. The Lord said to Satan, "Very well then, everything he has is in your power, but on the man himself do not lay a finger." Then Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. On one day when Job's sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, a messenger came to Job and said, "The oxen were plowing and the donkeys were grazing nearby, and the Sabeans attacked and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The fire of God fell from the heavens and burned up the sheep and the servants, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." While he was still speaking, another messenger came and said, "The Chaldeans formed 3 raiding parties and swept down on your camels and made off with them. They put the servants to the sword, and I am the only one who has escaped to tell you." What's going to happen next? While he was still speaking, yet another messenger came and said, "Your sons and daughters were feasting and drinking wine at the oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert, struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are dead. And I am the only one who escaped to tell you." At this, Job got up, he tore off his robe, shaved his head, then he fell on the ground in worship. He said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. Job started off this game of life really strong, hitting that first ladder almost straight to the top. And we see slide after slide after slide of everything that who? Satan put on Job. He doesn't blame God for a thing. In verse 22, we're actually told, in all this, Job did not sin by charging God with wrongdoing. Well, what does that mean? In the previous verse, he said, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised. So in Job's mind, the Lord gave him everything, which he did. I'm sure he worked hard for it. But at the end, he said, the Lord has taken away. But really, Satan was the one that has challenged Job through all of this. And Job just is not aware of the conversation in the courtroom that God and Satan had. So what does this mean? Well, we all know that the idea of the Lord gives and the Lord takes away is kind of a Christian cliche, if you will. We hear it all the time. It's something that we often don't hear when we're climbing up a ladder. Usually when things are good, we don't hear about God taking things away from us. It's only at the times where we get knocked down a couple of rungs or we find one of those slides where we're just not able to gain our traction again, and we find out that it's not truly God that took everything away. And it's in those backsliding moments that we use phrases like the Lord gave and the Lord take away. Remember, from our 10,000-foot view, we're reading a story, and we know in this story that Satan and God had a conversation about this challenge. So maybe in a way we could argue that, yeah, God did let it happen. God basically posed the challenge to Satan and said, hey, Job is upright, he's blameless, he's good. He's not going to waver. And there could be some argument for that, and I'm not going to try to tell you that this is the most perfect way to interpret this, but from that 10,000-foot view, reading through a story literally, we know about a conversation that happened privately, and then Job talked to God privately after and said, I don't blame you. See, the story can be completed from either side. Whether we're on our highs or whether we're on our lows, there's a way to look at this story. So as we move forward, we'd find out that Job is actually faced with a lot more challenges. And eventually, friends come to support him. We all need a friend. We all need a family member that is going to stick with us, stick beside us, walk through us in the challenges that life faces us with. These friends of Job, they are philosophers, really. And they just come to be by his side. In fact, we find out that they come and they sit by his side without talking for 7 days. 7 days of silence and solitude, just being there for Job in his hurt, in his worry, in his sadness, whatever that looks like for you or me, whatever verb we place in there, that's what these three friends are doing with Job. They're reflecting, and they're being with God in silence and solitude. By the time we reach chapter 3, though, Job gets to the point where he actually blames himself for even being born. Can you imagine the headspace that he would need to be in to be that sad, that upset, even with his friends by his side? He has lost everything, absolutely everything. And by chapter 4, we see this in verse 7. Consider now who being innocent has ever perished. Where were the upright ever destroyed? As I have observed, those who plow evil and those who sow trouble reap it. We've all heard that cliche too, right? We reap what we sow. We've said that maybe about our kids, or we've maybe have heard our parents say that about us in reference to themselves. We reap what we sow. It's kind of a fun little jingle, and we say it to kind of brush off some bad things that might be happening. But we know that we've heard this before, and sometimes it's serious, and sometimes it's a joke. But the reality is, it's coming from that same storyline of the God that gives is the same God that takes away. I think that we have to, though, consider what Job's thinking here. Job's in a very bad place. But the question he poses is, who being innocent has ever perished? Where were the upright ever destroyed? Well, there's a lot to consider there. How many times have we all seen innocent life lost, right? School shootings have been rampant since Columbine in 1999. We're in our third decade of just talking about mass shootings. And I don't want to get political here, but here's the real thing. We often will have conversations in and out of the church about what we believe on gun control, what we feel about young, innocent lives being lost. And we even know, and a lot of us are kind of reeling to understand and how to develop a mindset around the recent court ruling that we all know about. And we know that that's going to affect many, many lives. And we know that because of Jesus, we as Christians have to be careful how we navigate as a church surrounding the situation of abortion. Are we truly climbing a ladder? Or are we landing back on square one on one of these slides with all of the stuff happening in our world around us? And that's just a couple big primary examples going on right now in our world. The things that we see in today's news. But we also have to consider Jesus' life. The disciples and other Jesus followers that have been martyred for their belief system. Were they innocent for what they believed? I know this is a little bit heavy, but the reality is Job is facing a whole lot worse than what I'm even talking about right now. Job is hashing out all kinds of details with his friends, and he goes from praising God at the very beginning, chapter 1 into chapter 2, he's praising God. And now we get chapter 3, chapter 4, he's in such a mindset that he literally wants to die. And we'll pick up in chapter 9, beginning in verse 21, and it says, "Although I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I despise my own life. It is all the same. That is why I say he destroys both the blameless and the wicked." Catch this one in verse 24. Ready? "When a land falls into the hands of the wicked, he blindfolds its judges. If it is not he, then who is it?" This is Job talking about God. By the time we get to chapter 10, and we'll see this in verse 17, there's further agony in Job, and he continues his argument with God, and he says, "You bring new witnesses against me, and increase your anger towards me." "Your forces come against me wave upon wave. Why then did you bring me out of the womb? I wish I had died before any eye even saw me. If only I had never come into being or had carried straight from the womb to the grave." "Are not my few days almost over? Turn away from me so I can have a moment's joy before I go to the place of no return. To the land of gloom and utter darkness, to the land of deepest night, of utter darkness and disorder, where even the light is like darkness." Job is literally here hoping for hell. He's fully flipped sides from chapter 1 at the very beginning of not blaming God for everything to chapter 10, every little thing is now God's fault. This is like monumental to go from this super embracing side of a Christian relationship to completely basically saying, God, I basically don't believe in you anymore. I wish hell upon myself. But Job's friends stay by his side. They have these long-winded conversations. Remember, we're just in verse 10. From basically verse 10 through, or from chapter 10 through chapter 38, the conversation goes on and on and on and on with friend 1, with friend 2, and with friend 3. They're hashing out, what does this mean? What does this look like? I don't understand why my life circumstances look the way that they do. And finally, in Job 38, beginning in verse 1, we find this. God decides that enough is enough. That's kind of what we expect, right? We expect God to intervene in those bad situations. When we're at the lowest rung, when we've hit the slide the whole way to the bottom, God intervenes and he says this, the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm, and he said, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set, and who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together, and all the angels shouted for joy. God goes on and on and on for about 2.5 chapters, asking question after question about the universe. The creator of all is asking a fallible human person like, hey, do you even know me? Do you even know what I've done? Who are you to challenge everything that I've done for you and everything that I've created for you? And the big thing there is that God tells them that I'm going to ask you these questions and I expect an answer. So we see then in Job 42, verse 2, it says, I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak, and I will question you, and you shall answer me. See, my ears have heard you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. God acknowledges Job's response. And I think we all have that expectation, but remember at the very beginning, there was that moment of prayer and worship. Job took off his clothes, he shaved his head, he got down on his knees, and he worshiped. Have we done that in our lives? I'm not telling you to shave your heads. I'm not telling you to go outside naked or something like that. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is God had such an impact in Job's life that he was willing to hold God blameless and worship him. He was willing to go to God in deep prayer. And then his friends came along and they sat with God in silence and in solitude. When have we done that? When in your life have you needed to do that and you skipped that step? You thought, I can jump up on that next rung all by myself. But here we see God we see God really challenge him, and we see Job flip sides again because God's good. And we see that God forgives the words that Job had said and the words that all of his friends had said in all those 30-some chapters that we skipped. Now in verse 42, verse 7, we do find out that God is angry with the two friends for not having spoken the truth about him. And so there's a command. In verse 8, it says, now take 7 bulls and 7 rams and go to my servant Job and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. You have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has." After all of those things that Job said, God has laid out complete forgiveness to the point that he calls his friends to come and repent as well. That's a pretty solid God that we have. God knew from the very beginning that Job was upright and blameless, and this was all solidified in Job's prayer response. Remember I said at the very beginning all the descriptions of Job and his family, how important that was? Let's look at verse 10. After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had before. All his brothers and sisters and everyone who had known him before came and ate with him in his house. They confronted and consoled him over all the trouble the Lord had brought on him, and each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part, more than chapter 1. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, 1,000 donkeys, and he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Again, I have to go back to that author and pastor that I love. John Mark Comer said it this way: God is affirming Job wrestling with God in prayer. And that's the main takeaway here. God is affirming Job wrestling with God in prayer. Notice that Job was racked by despair, by doubt, and by anger, but it was all directed at God, straight to God. It was not a Facebook rant. It was not an angry ex-Christian blog post or whatever. It was none of that. It was all prayer. It was between Job and his God. It's between us and our God when we have these challenges. And it was Job wrestling with God himself. When he despaired to God. It was Job wrestling with God himself, and he's despaired to God. That's the key here. When he doubted, what did he do? He doubted to God. When he was angry, he started to just pound on the chest of God himself, and God loved it. John Mark continues with this: God is not nearly as scared of honesty as we are. And prayer is not a place to be good. It's a place to be honest. God is not a place to be good, but a place to be honest. Your relationship with God is a place where you are naked and open and exposed, and everything is laid out on the table. And that is exactly how God wants to interact with you and with me. I love that quote. As we wrap up, I have one more quote that I kind of want to share with you that kind of really solidifies this. In the book Prince Caspian from the Chronicles of Narnia, written, of course, by C.S. Lewis, he writes, "You come from the Lord Adam and the Lady Eve," said Aslan, "and that is both honor enough to erect the head of the poorest beggar, and shame enough to bow the shoulders of the greatest emperor on earth. Be content." In all of the chutes and ladders of our lives, in all of the highs and all of the lows, you can throw this one up there, we must find a way to be content. And if that means pounding on the chest of God, then that is what we must do. God wants our whole life. He wants our prayers. Even in our stubbornness like Job, he desires the proximity to us. Sometimes that proximity does come as we take a few steps on higher rungs, but other times we find a chute. But we have to let God catch us at the bottom. See, church, there's good and there's bad. There's highs and there's lows. And as we prepare to end today in worship, we must remember that that's what God wants from us. We have good weeks and we have bad weeks. We have moments where our cars are breaking down and there's a baby on the way. And God's still good. We have to let him catch us. We have to be vulnerable to him in prayer. We need to stay in close proximity to him. And we have to remember to worship. Let's pray. God, we come to you out of no selfish ambition. God, we come to you because prayer matters. We come to you because we desire proximity. God, our world is in a very, very weird place. There's good and there's evil surrounding us every day, in school, at work, at home. But God, we know that if we are upright and blameless in your eyes, that you will provide a hedge of protection. And even though we face challenges that the world provides, you are still good. Satan will not win over our lives. God, thank you for bringing us together. Thank you for allowing us to talk about the ups and the downs of life through board games. Because, God, that's just fun. And we know that if you were right here with us, you would just be promoting the fun of being your children. That's your desire for us. God, as we continue out this afternoon, we just want to lift our voices to you. Allow us to leave here knowing what Job's life looked like. And wherever we are in that experience with our own life, allow us to promote coming to you first, not throwing it out on Facebook, blog posts, but coming to you through prayer, worship, silence, and solitude. Let that be our practice this week as we move forward to getting closer